All right, tonight we pick up our story in Matthew chapter 12 and in verse 9. Now, we are right in the middle of a period of controversy at this particular point. Last week we spent the entire period talking about the first 8 verses. Tonight we're going to be talking about a whole lot more. But I want to call your attention now to the fact that the controversy is getting hotter and hotter and hotter concerning Jesus. It's kind of interesting as you look at the life of Christ. You can study Christ in 172 different ways, I guess, but that's nothing new. You could study anybody in 172 different ways. You know, their philosophy here or this or their practice or what they did and so forth and so on. But now as you're studying Christ, one of the things that you can see is that when he came on the scene, very gentle. People were looking for the kingdom. They were trying to force themselves into the kingdom, as we've already seen. Everybody looking for it. They were happy to hear him. And as time goes on, they began to see that he is a strange individual. He is not fitting their concept of what the Messiah would be like. And so since he's not fitting their concept, now their concept would be like a king. Suppose that I were to tell you that we're going to have a king visiting here this next Sunday. Now, describe him. How would you describe him? When he comes in, would you expect to be able to look around and identify him? In other words, he's a king. So I bet that's him, sitting right back there. So somehow or another, he would rise to these high expectations, and we'd think, I know, you know, he's going to be outstanding. Well, this king is going to be the King of Kings. He's going to be the greatest king that ever lived. He's going to be the Messiah. He's going to conquer Rome. He's going to lift the Jewish world out of its captivity. He's going to be the answer to all of their problems. He's going to be David, King David again. See, and so they had this concept of him. And then when Jesus comes on the scene, lowly, born down in a little town, Bethlehem, raised in what town? Nazareth. So that people would say, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Just a little old town that's up there that had a bad reputation. Then as he started preaching, he wasn't dressed in king's clothing. He didn't ride a big white horse. He didn't have an entourage around him somehow or another where people could wonder who that important man is. He was just a regular Jew that was walking around. And who was he associating with? Was he associating with the kings and the Sanhedrin and just the common, ordinary people, talking to them, going into the synagogues, just a very, very common individual that's there. And so he doesn't fit their concept. However, his teaching is so different. It's so different from all of the other rabbis that are there that the thing that amazed them was, we've never heard this kind of teaching before. The other rabbis who came on the scene, they would come in and for their authority, here it is, I'm Rabbi Williams, and so I'm teaching you what the law says. Now remember, at this time, they were taking the man-made traditions of the Jews. So here it is, I'm Rabbi Williams, and I'm going to tell you now what the law of Moses said when it says, remember the Sabbath. So now I'm going to explain it to you. Now, guess where I'm going to get my authority? Anybody know where I'm going to get my authority? Where? I didn't get the last words.
Scrolls.
No. No, that's where I should get them. But that's not where I'm going to get them. I'm going to quote another rabbi. See, I'm going to quote one of the old fathers back there. And so rabbis quote rabbis. Now they still do that today. When you hear a rabbi talking, he'll be talking, he'll say to do this. Now he'll say, now Rabbi Sheminsky or something said in 1647 this. Well, if it's that old, then it must be true, is kind of the idea. And so they would quote the old rabbis. But Jesus, instead of quoting rabbis and saying, now here's what Rabbi so-and-so said, he'd say, here's what I say unto you. See? And he would deal with the law of Moses. And so they were amazed. They said, he teaches us one who has authority. So his teaching was outstanding. Now, he is entering into their society, and he's breaking their traditions all the way through this 3-year period that he's there. You have to understand, he's walking among them. He's teaching the law. They're not used to hearing the law. They're used to hearing the tradition of the fathers. And as we get on just a little bit later on, he'll bring this out, and we'll see that it's all talked about here in Matthew the 15th chapter. But he's teaching the law. Here's what Moses said. And so he's teaching these people with authority. And then he's not following their traditions. He's breaking their traditions. Well, last week we saw what tradition he's breaking, and this was a big one. What is it that was just constantly following Jesus, and he constantly breaking this tradition? Because in their eyes, it was a big one. What was it?
Breaking the Sabbath.
Breaking the Sabbath. See? You're breaking the Sabbath. Last week we studied, they went along and they picked off some grain and they ate the grain, and so he charged him with breaking the Sabbath. So he's dealing with this. Well, this is bringing the controversy into a focal point. It's bringing it in now, and the controversy and the hatred of the Pharisees for him is just going to climb and climb and climb until finally it ends up then in his death. So now, this last week we got down to through verse 8, and so he closed the discussion with this statement. Now I want you to think about this. How would this hit those Jews? How would it hit you if I were to tell you this next Sunday when we come together to worship, we're going to do a different thing somehow? And you say, but Lowell, that's not right. And I say, look, I'm Lord of the first day of the week. I go get in my car and go home. Would you have any talking about me tonight? Would that have a big discussion? That's what he said. Only instead of the first day of the week, it was the Sabbath day in their law. He said, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And he left them with that. And so what that means is, I am Lord of the Sabbath. I made the Sabbath. Right? Now, let's notice how he continues on this Sabbath day. And he departed thence and went into their synagogue. And behold, a man having a withered hand, and they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? That they might accuse him. Now, he goes into their synagogue on the Sabbath day. There's a man there with a withered hand, very obvious. Now, have you ever gone into a church building, gone in anywhere where there was somebody with a withered hand or a withered arm? You probably have, haven't you? I've been in a lot of them. Have you ever had anybody walk up and ask you about healing that withered man, whether it be lawful to heal him? I've never had anybody to walk up and ask me that, see, around there. But this is what they're going to do. Now, they know that here's a man with a withered hand. They know he's coming into the midst. They're setting a trap for him. Now, it says this, see down here, that they might accuse him. So they come up and they say, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Because they know what he's getting ready to do, don't they? See? They know his activities. They know that he has been challenging them. All the way through, he's been challenging them. Moses is the one you're to obey, not the old rabbis, not the tradition. And so here now is a man in there. So now they're going to ask him, is it lawful to heal on Sabbath day? Now, they're doing it to accuse him. That means that they have answers already for him. I don't know what those answers were, but let's try to put ourselves there. Suppose we're in a crowd, these Pharisees, and we say, now let's get him. We know that there's a man sitting there with a withered hand, and we know that when he comes in, we'll set him up and say, is it lawful to do that? Now, if he says no, well, right then he's going to be wrong, see. He's going to be wrong, so he can't say no. So what will his answer have to be? Yes. So if he says yes, what will their answer be? Don't you do any work on the Sabbath. And here it is, you're coming in here, and you're going to heal that man. You are breaking the Sabbath. You are breaking the law of Moses, blah, 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 blah. You're not the Christ, see? So they're all set up. They're all set up for it. So either way it goes, they're ready to get him. Now, we'll notice this, and it gets tougher and tougher as he goes along through his life. This just keeps getting worse and worse with these setups that he's got. Yeah.
Now, are these Pharisees that are questioning him, are they the same ones that were just...
Well, when you say the same...
He's already just
got
through saying, well, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah, it's the same group. It's the same group. So I don't know whether it's the same 6 people or 4 people or whatever it is. Yeah, but it's the same group that he's here now. So they're coming in and they're setting him up. And they're asking him this. And he said unto them, now, remember a long time ago I told you, I was going to point out as we go through not only the miracles that Jesus does that shows he's the Son of God, but I want to point out how he answered questions, how he dealt with his audience. How many of you consider yourself wise enough to say that as you've gone through life, you have handled every wise guy the way he should be handled? Everybody that set you up, everybody asked you a stupid question, you gave them a stupid answer so they'd look stupid. Everybody that asked you a good question, you gave them a good answer because you knew that they were honest. How many of you could say, I've been able to do that. I've never made a mistake. See? Well, Jesus is doing this. So he knows what they're setting him up for. And instead of him saying, oh, yes, it is, he comes back and he says, what man is there, would there be of you, that shall have 1 sheep? And if this fall in the pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man of more value than a sheep? So he gives them an example. He said, now let me ask you guys a question. Who is it here who, if you have a sheep that falls in the pit, now this is in a big hole and it can't get out. It falls in a pit on the Sabbath day. It's laying down there bleeding and it will die and so forth. Who is it that will not reach down, get the sheep, and pull it out and save its life? Well, everybody agrees you can do that. There was no controversy about whether you could do that or not. See? Now, keep in mind, see, we talked about how these people tried to make these laws about the Sabbath day, and they had these 1,600 rules and all of this that is there. Now, thou shalt not labor on the Sabbath day is what it is. Suppose that a Jew had a business set up like a wrecker today, a truck, you see, and where there's an accident, he goes out and he picks up these cars and comes in. Suppose that a Jew had a sheep rescuer, sheep wrecker. He had this business. And on the Sabbath day, he would go around and he would work to rescue animals. Could he do that? No. That's labor. You're not to labor. You're not to have that job. You're not to work for that profit. But what happens when a sheep falls in a ditch? See? Are you not to rescue it? And they all said, oh yeah, you know, of course you would rescue a sheep. And then he says, now isn't a man of much more value than a sheep? In verse 12. How much then is a man more value than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath day. So instead of him saying, yes, it's lawful, now look at his wisdom. Had he said, yes, it is lawful, can't you just imagine what they would have said? They'd have jumped all over him about working. But when he said, which of you has a sheep fall in a ditch, would not pick it up? Yes, it is lawful. Has he disarmed him? See? Totally disarmed him. Now, And then, to drive his point home, it's not just talk. He then goes ahead and saith, he saith to the man, stretch forth thy hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole as the other. So the man stretched forth his hand, and bang, it was healed. And so he healed on the Sabbath day. Now, there's not much they can do at this point in here. What can you do? How do you want to argue against this point? You say, you have sinned. Well, what about your sheep? How many of you have rescued a sheep or an animal, or when something is in trouble on the Sabbath day, that you reach down and you helped it, that you did good? They'd all do that. That's what the argument is going to be based on, and he did it. He's taking the argument away from him. In order to argue with him, they would have to look like just an absolute fool. So let's see what they did. But the Pharisees went out, so they left him, not much they could say, and took counsel against him. That means they asked themselves, what can we do with this guy? Now think what this would be. Suppose you and I and 3 other people here had been trying to catch a guy now for the past couple of years, and we'd set traps for him and ask him questions, and every time it comes back and he makes us look like a fool. And so we ask him here tonight, and he makes us look like a fool. So I call you and these other 3 guys in, we go in here in the room. What will we talk about if we take counsel? What are we going to do? How are we going to get him? What are we going to do? Every time we try, every time we set a trap, it backfires on us. Now, keep this in mind, because it'll just keep getting worse and worse and worse until finally they'll just be beside themselves in doing this. Now, in verse 15, and Jesus perceiving it withdrew from hence. He knew they were taking counsel. What are we going to do? What can we do about this individual? So he left. And many followed him, and he healed them all. So everybody followed him, he healed them. So what kind of a crowd would he have around him now? Friendly or unfriendly? See? Got a real friendly crowd around him. And charged them that they should not make him known. Now here again is what he charged them, not to make him known. Now, we've talked about this. Sometimes Jesus would say, go tell people. Other times he'd say, don't make it known. Now, when you take the atmosphere in this particular occasion, would there be a good reason he says, don't make it known what I've done? You see to you? Because it's an explosive atmosphere. These Pharisees are mad. These Pharisees are not interested in truth. These Pharisees are just trying to get him. And so he goes on about his business. But what he's saying is, don't agitate it anymore. Don't just push him, you see, anymore. So it's not agitating. Now, look at what he did. Jesus, even though there was lots of controversy all around him, was not an agitator. See? So he didn't agitate. But now look what it says. He said, don't make it known, that it might be fulfilled. Here's the reason he didn't want it known, that it might be fulfilled, that was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. Behold my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my spirit is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall declare judgment to the Gentiles. Now Isaiah is saying that when the servant comes, which is the Christ, this is what he will do. And then, this is the verse that he's quoting, and this is the one that's after. He, the servant, the Christ, he shall not strive, nor cry aloud. Neither shall anyone hear his voice in the streets. Now, when Isaiah said, when the Messiah comes, he will be of such a nature that he's not going from town to town and agitate people and cause problems through his agitation. Now, he will speak the truth. People will turn against him. They will cause problems. But it's not because he's a debater and arguing and trying to cause all kind of uproar. No, when the Christ comes, he's not going to strive. He's not going to get out and fight in the streets. He's not going to cry aloud. Now this is yelling out there. He's not going to get in that. And no one shall hear his voice in the streets. That is his loud voice that he's crying out. The Messiah will be a calm, gentle person. Here's the kind of person he will be. A bruised reed shall he not break, and smoking flax shall he not quench. Now, the other day we talked about this bruised reed, you know, and I took one in, brought one in. It's a hollow weed is really what it is. Pampas grass would be one, where they grow up there, you know, and you can just take it and you can pinch it and it's hollow, and when you pinch it, it weakens it and it just falls over. Now, I know what I do with my pampas grass when it falls over. I don't know what you do, and I'm sure I shouldn't do this, but you know what I do? I pull it out. I cut it off. I throw it away. I don't want to see those things, those weak things just laying out there. I like the nice straight ones. I got out the other day and I cut them out. Now, he's not talking about pampas grass, and he's not talking about keeping your garden. He's talking about people. Now, when people are so weak, that this man who will not fight, yell, cry, scream, cause problems, when people are so weak that they're all bent over, that they're like that weed. You look at them, they're not worth keeping. He'll not break it off. He'll try to heal those kind of people. And smoking flax will he not put out. Now, smoking flax would be, in our vocabulary, a kerosene lamp. What do we call the thing that you light? A wick. That's right. So, if you've ever had a kerosene lamp, you know you got the wick on there. And when it runs low and the fire goes down and the flame keeps going, what finally happens when it gets down and there's no more flame and the wick is still hot and kind of glowing? Just start smoking. It'll smoke all over the place. What do you do when your lamp gets like that? What does anybody do? Run over. Put that thing out. You put that smoking wick out. Now, when Jesus finds somebody that's so weak that they're about to die, they don't have any more life in them than that wick with the fire going down, and all it has is just a little spark left in it, he'll blow it back into flame. He'll not put it out. So this is a prophecy talking about the Messiah when he comes. The character of the Messiah. He's a man that will come. He's a man that will help the Gentiles. He's a man that will help the poor, the needy, the down and out, regardless of how low it is, he'll help, till he send forth judgment unto victory, and in his name shall the Gentiles hope. So he's going to be this kind of man. The Messiah will be this kind of man until victory has come forth and the Gentiles will have conquered and come out victorious. Of course, when will that be? You put yourself back there with the Messiah. When would it be when the Gentiles could come to him the same as the Jews? See? It's after Pentecost, wasn't it? See? After the day of Pentecost, his church was established. Then go ye into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. So this is what the Messiah is going to be like. Okay, now then, they're unable to do anything to him now because he's showing their ignorance in this. The next big fight, here it is. Then was brought unto him one possessed with a demon, blind and dumb, and he healed him, insomuch that the dumb man spake and saw, and all the multitudes were amazed. Isn't that the purpose for miracles, as we've seen before? So they were all amazed and said, can this be the son of David? Now what does that terminology mean? Can this be the son of David? It wouldn't mean anything if it says, can this be the son of Shimon? Okay, The Messiah, the king, is coming out of the root of Jesse. Who was Jesse's son? David. David was the first great king. Now, the kingly tribe is coming down, and the Messiah will come out of the kingly tribe, the tribe of David, be an offspring of David. And so, when the Messiah comes, they called him the Son of David. See? Can this be the Son of David? Which is another way of saying, can this be the Messiah? See? Can this be him? Now, 24. When the Pharisees heard it, you got to imagine these Pharisees standing around. Boy, they don't like to hear these people questioning, could this be the Messiah, see? So, it said, when the Pharisees heard it, they said, this man doth not cast out demons, but by Beelzebub, the prince of demons. So here's the great authority now. The authority, this man doesn't cast out demons except by the prince of demons, Beelzebub. Well, let's kind of break that down and see two or three things of what they have said right there. First of all, did they admit he cast out demons? They sure did, didn't they? They admit, yeah, okay, he's casting out demons. But let me tell you, he's casting them out by the power of Beelzebub. He's casting them out by the power of the prince, the ruler of demons. Well, who's Beelzebub? Beelzebub, the only time in the Bible, the only other time it's used, is in 2 Kings chapter 1 and in verse 2. And here, it's talking here about the Israelite people. And it says, and Hazael the king fell down through the lattice and so forth, and he was sick. And he got sick, and so he called his person and he said, go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover from this sickness. Okay, now we're back under the Old Testament. Here is a Jewish king. He fell and got hurt. He's in real bad shape. He wants to know whether he's going to live. Instead of going to Jehovah God, he sent somebody to whom? Beelzebub. Go down and ask Beelzebub, the god of the Ekrons. Who would the Ekrons be? Are those Jews or heathens? See? And so this is a heathen god. The word means, by the way, god of the flies. That's all we know about it. Why they had god of the flies, we don't know. They had gods for everything, you see, in those days. So they picked out and said, he's just doing it by the god of the flies. See, that's there. And knowing their thoughts, he said unto them. Now notice how he answered them here. They've admitted that he cast out demons, but he's doing it through the god of the flies. And knowing their thoughts, he said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan casteth out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then shall his kingdom stand? Now this is just a rhetorical question, isn't it? What happens if an army goes into battle against another army out here, and we just got through with Iraq? What would happen? We go over to Iraq, and then all of a sudden the Navy and Air Force start fighting the Marines. We're going to lose the battle, aren't we? We're going to kill each other. And so what he's saying is, in a kingdom or in a house, in anything, when you divide it, it cannot stand. Now let's give Satan more credit from that. See, he said if Satan is divided against Satan, if he casts out Satan, then he's divided and his kingdom can't stand. He's destroying his own kingdom. See, which is, he said, nobody would do that. Now verse 27. And if I by Beelzebub cast out demons, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they shall be your judges. Now that's an interesting question. This is one of those questions, again, that we dealt with last week. Remember in Proverbs 26, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. Now, history shows us that the Jews, the priests and so forth, claimed that they could cast out demons. They claimed they could cast them out. Now, as we've said before, people who want to claim they can do miracles, they always do them, miracles that you can't see, you know, that can't be proven. So now, I'm going to cast a demon out. I'll cast one out of West, and he looks pretty well like one right there, so we'll get over here. So, get out of there! Did you see it go? It went. It went right through that window. Now you prove it did. You're laughing at me. You prove it didn't. I just cast a demon out of him. You see how easy it is? So they would go around, they were doing this. Now you remember in Acts the 19th chapter that there were those 7 brothers that went around and they were casting out these demons and they came up and said, Paul I know and Jesus I know, but who are you? You know that the demon said, and finally tore his clothing off of him and so forth. These people, they would go around and they would claim that they were casting out demons. Now Josephus tells us about what they did. We have very little actual knowledge, but Josephus was a man who lived in that particular age. And he said that they had Jews who was going around and claiming they could cast out demons. And in order to prove it, instead of me doing like Wes, you know, here, okay, get going. Then I say, I saw it, it went. See, well, nobody else saw it, you can't prove it either way. Okay, they would put a glass of water up on the table. And then we get over and they'd say, okay, now come out of him. And all of a sudden, the glass of water would tip over. And they'd say, see, when the demon went out, it knocked over the water. And that's how they would prove it. Now, Josephus tells us that. Can there be any little tricks on how to knock over glasses of water and so forth, and magicians doing these things, little strings, and you do all of this? Sure. See, it's a very easy trick. But Josephus says, Josephus was a Jew, and he's telling that's the way that they would do it. Now, they claim to be able to cast out demons. Jesus here is not saying that they cast out demons. I want us to see this. He's not saying that. He's asking a question. Now, if you say, you admit I cast out demons, and if you say I do it by the power of Beelzebub, let me ask you a question. By whom do your sons do it? You claim they do it. By what power do they do it? Well, if they say, and they obviously have to say, by the power of God. Well, then why would you say I'm casting out demons by the power of God? What's the difference? You say they do it, and you know that I do it. In their little hypocrisy in there? You say they do it by the power of God, and I do it by the power of Beelzebub? See? And so what he's doing is, he's answering a fool according to his folly. So this, of course, is going to shut them up. They're just nothing that they can say, really, as a result of this. Now he goes ahead then, and he says this, 28. But if I, by the Spirit of God, cast out demons, then is the kingdom of God come upon you. Now think of that power that's in that statement. What has Jesus' sermons been about from day one? John the Baptist came on the scene, what did he say? Repent ye, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Jesus came on the scene, what did he preach? Repent ye, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He's getting these people ready for the kingdom. So now Jesus throws this out again. Now, if I, by the Spirit of God, and you know that I cast out demons, by the way, how would they know that he cast out demons? See, now you don't know whether I cast one out of Wes or not. And you can't know. How did they know he cast out demons? Okay, that guy all of a sudden who couldn't speak, was deaf and dumb, all of a sudden he's healed. He just healed. See? And now, if Wes was up here and maybe he was having some kind of a trauma and he was shaking all over and doing all this, and I said, watch, I have the power to do this, you see, and I do like that, he just comes right out of it, just right out. Oh, thank you. Boy, I feel good now. You couldn't argue with me, could you? You say, well, how'd Lowell do that with snapping his fingers? You might not be able to figure it out, but you can't argue with me. You can't say I didn't do anything. Especially
if you knew the person for years on end and that's the way he's been.
Yeah, sure, when you know it's not a put-up job, you see. And so when Jesus cast a demon out, all of a sudden he can hear and he can see, he's healed. So you can't argue that I didn't cast out demons. Now, if I'm doing it by the Spirit of God, and you can't say I don't because you claim they can be cast out with the Spirit of God, then if I'm doing this, the kingdom of God has come upon you. This is a warning. Get ready. See? I'm trying to show you the kingdom is coming. Then he asks a question. Or how can one enter into the house of the strong man and spoil his goods except he first bind the strong man, and then he will spoil his house? Now, here's the analogy. If there's a real strong guy, 250-pound muscular giant living up the street, and I want to go in tonight and steal his furniture, what's the first thing I have to do? I have to bind him, don't I? I have to take control of him somehow or another. See? If he's got a watchdog out in the front yard, I've got to take control of that watchdog. In other words, I've got to get control before I can tear up the guy's house. That's all Jesus is saying. Now, Jesus is saying, look, if you're going to tear up a strong man's house, you have to be able to bind the strong man. See? And so he's telling them, this is what I am doing. And he that is not with me is against me, and he that is and he that gathereth not with me scattereth. So he said, I've come, I'm binding the strong man, and if you're not with me, you're against me. Again, a warning. Straighten up. Listen to me. If I am really doing this, the kingdom of God has come upon you. It's serious business. If you're not with me, you're against me. Look at this. He's challenging them. He's challenging them. Now, here's the interesting thing. Where it talks about entering into the strong man's house, obviously, who's the strong man's house that Jesus is entering in? Whose kingdom is Jesus coming to tear up? I'm going up here on Main Street and tear up this guy's house. I have to bind the strong man. Jesus came, who's the strong man? The devil, Satan. I've come now to destroy Satan. I'm going to destroy his kingdom. Now, here's an interesting thing. Flip over to Luke, the 10th chapter and verse 17. Now, this is another time, but Jesus has sent out 70 of his disciples to go out. Just like we've already studied, he sent out the 12. He sends out the 70, and they come back. And the 70 return with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in thy name. Now, these guys were excited. They'd gone out, and he had given them the power to cast out demons. And they came and said, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name, by your authority. Listen to his reply. Listen to his reply. He said unto them, I beheld Satan fallen as lightning from heaven. When you were out there and you were doing that and you were casting out demons, Jesus said, I beheld Satan fallen as lightning from heaven. Now, this is not saying that Satan fell from heaven. This is what fell from heaven in this statement? Lightning. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. When you were out there casting out demons, you were giving knockout blows to Satan. See, that's what he's saying. You're bringing him under control. So when Jesus came and he's casting out these demons, this is part of him bringing Satan under total control. Now, do you know when Satan was brought under total control? Well, flip over to Hebrews chapter 2. This is kind of interesting here. As we look at this, we can see when, when this finally happened totally and completely, so that Satan had no more ruling power in there. Okay, in Hebrews chapter 2, and it's down about verse 14, we find this. Since then the children are sharers in flesh and blood, he, Christ, also partook in like manner of the same, that through death he might bring to naught him that had the power of death, that is the devil. When Jesus died, he brought to naught. What does that mean? Naught. Zero. Nothing. He brought Satan down, took his total power away from him. When Christ died on that cross, when he shed his blood for the salvation of man, from that moment forward, Satan lost his control. Now you might say, well, isn't he still active? Yeah, he's still active. But he's not active in the sense that he can control you. People say, well, he can send demons into you. No, he can't do that. Can he force you to do something? No, he can't do that. Well, what power does Satan have today? The answer to that is found, we'll not go to read it, but James 1 and verse 13, and that is temptation. He has the power to tempt you, and that's all it is. Satan, when Jesus came and he bound him, he brought him under control. It's kind of like if there were a lion out in our parking lot, and he's been out there for years, and people get out of their car, and once in a while that lion jumps on them, tears them apart, and jumps on, tears somebody else apart, and we try to control that lion. We can't get that lion controlled, and that lion is out there menacing all of that. Suppose that somebody comes, and that lion jumps out, and he brings that lion to naught. What does that mean? He has him under control. So he's got him down. That lion has lost his power. He puts a collar around his neck, slaps a log chain on it, ties him out there to the lamp post that we've got, and that old lion is out there tied up with that chain. Now, does that lion have the power to get you now? Kind of depends, doesn't it? Could you come and attend services here for the next 10 years and not be afraid of that lion? Yeah. Get you. Can the lion get somebody when they come? Yeah. What's the reason? Who are the only people that lion can get? The ones that come in to the chain where he can get them. So that old lion, if he can get out there and lay down and he sees you get out of the car, he purrs like a pussycat instead of roars like a lion. He looks at those big eyes, and he can get somebody to think, isn't that a cute lion? And he'd walk up, I want to pet that little lion. And he'd walk up to pet the lion, and the next thing you're going down his throat. Well, the lion has power. But does a lion have power? Only tempting power. He can tempt you, and if you will yield to the temptation, he's got you. But otherwise, he can't get you, see. So Jesus is bringing these demons under control. He brought Satan under control totally at when he died on the cross. Now, that brings us down to this. Notice the next thing he says here in verse 32. And whosoever shall speak a word against the Son of Man, it shall be forgiven him. But whosoever shall speak against the Holy Spirit, it shall not be forgiven him, neither in this world nor in the world to come. Now there is a very interesting verse. We have 90 seconds to cover that, which means the only thing that I'm going to say tonight is class dismissed, and we'll cover it in detail to the next class period.